I'd like to call the Committee on House Administration to come to order, and I would also like to welcome you back to round 2 of our committee funding hearings. Today we will hear from our colleagues on Energy and Commerce, Ways and Means, and the Rules Committee. This afternoon we'll follow the exact format as we had as the hearings last week, and hopefully we'll be out of here relatively quickly. I'd like to recognize my friend and ranking member, Mr. Longworth, for any opening remarks or statements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thought that our first day of hearings went well. I presume that this will as well, and I thank you for the spirit of cooperation and bipartisanship we've approached this, and the commitment to the 1/3, 2/3 in terms of funding. And I too hope that this will be a expeditious proceeding today.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Chairman Waxman and Ranking Member Barton and ask you to join us up on the table. And I am also now willingly going to relinquish my chair to Mr. Gonzalez, who's a member of your committee, and I hope it's worthwhile, and I hope he gets even with you for how you've been treating him over the last couple of years. I'd like to give the chair to Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and for giving me the opportunity to welcome the esteemed Chairman and Ranking Member of Energy and Commerce, on which I have the great privilege of serving, and just have such great admiration for both Mr. Waxman and Mr. Barton, my fellow Texan. I believe that each, the Chairman and the Ranking Member will be given 5 minutes to make their presentation, and then, of course, if we have any questions, follow up in more information. So with that, I would recognize Henry Waxman, who is the Chairman of Energy and Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman and my fellow Californian. I want to thank you for this opportunity to testify on the Committee on Energy and Commerce's budget proposal for the 111th Congress. And I'm pleased to be here with the ranking member of our committee, Mr. Barton. During his tenure as chairman of the committee, Mr. Barton provided the minority with 1/3 of the committee resources, an approach that Mr. Dingell followed in the last Congress. And as the new chair of the committee, I also intend to continue this approach to allocating resources for the minority. As we begin the 111th Congress, the Energy and Commerce Committee faces a tremendous workload. 3 of the top priorities of the new Obama administration and the American public are in the jurisdiction of our committee: health care reform, climate change legislation, and energy independence. While each of these issues alone requires significant attention and resources, the committee will be undertaking them simultaneously. Beyond these key matters, the committee will also be looking at food safety reform, comprehensive FDA reform, tobacco legislation, telecommunications reforms, chemical security, cybersecurity, generic drug reform, as well as the reauthorization of the Toxic Substances Control Act, National Highway Transportation Safety Act, and the Federal Trade Commission. We've already been working at a fast pace. In this first few weeks of this Congress, the committee completed a marathon markup of the Economic Recovery Bill, played a lead role in the enactment of legislation to expand comprehensive health care for millions of children, and spearheaded the development of legislation to postpone the transition to digital television until June 12, 2009. We also launched what will be a series of hearings to examine issues relating to climate change policy, and conducted an oversight hearing to examine food safety issues raised by the recent outbreak of salmonella in peanut products. To accomplish our agenda, the subcommittee needs to add new staff, including a senior Medicare expert, a senior motor vehicles expert, a staff member to represent the chairman emeritus, and additional staff for the subcommittees that will play leading roles in advancing legislation. The committee has also incurred transition costs resulting from a change in the committee chairmanship. These costs include compensating policy and administrative staff serving the committee on a transitional basis. As a result, the committee is requesting an 11.4% increase in funding for 2009 over 2008. Of this amount, 4.7% is for cost of living increases for staff salaries and inflation increases for equipment, supplies, and other expenses. The remaining 6.7% is necessary for the committee to meet its increased workload. In its proposed budget for 2010, the committee is requesting a 10% increase over the proposed 2009 budget. This increase reflects equipment purchases that will promote efficiency by updating the committee computer system and telecommuting capabilities. It will allow us to help close a large pay gap between our staff salaries and comparable salaries in the executive branch. We're trying to be as economical as possible in this budget request. The committee is not requesting any increase in funding for travel or equipment from the 110th Congress budget, but to enable the committee to fill its legislative and oversight responsibilities, we will need more resources. Once again, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to testify before the committee. Hope you will look favorably upon our request, and we look forward to working with you in the 111th Congress.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Mr. Barton from the great state of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lundgren, and Mr. Harper. I would add one item to Chairman Waxman's agenda, that is the reauthorization of the National Institute of Health. It's currently operating under a 3-year authorization which expires this year, and I would hope that our chairman would put that on his agenda too, since we've substantially increased the budget of NIH and then the stimulus package that passed last week. I can go one of 3 ways on this year's budget request for the Energy and Commerce Committee. I could support a budget freeze in which we make do with the same resources we had last year, which in the case of the Republican budget for the committee would be $3.4 million. I could support an adjustment for inflation, which my staff tells me is 1.8%. Or, given the increased workload in the agenda that Chairman Waxman has just outlined, I could support a slightly larger increase than the pure inflationary adjustment of 1.8%, so long as that increase, the minority gets 1/3 of the resources, which Chairman Waxman has just indicated he supports, and which, in your opening statements, the chairman and ranking member of this committee said that they support also. What I cannot do, with all due respect, is support the entire increase that Chairman Waxman has just outlined of 11.4% this year and 10% next year. My math says that's a 21.4% increase. Given the shape our economy's in, I don't think the Congress could hold its head up with that kind of an increase. Having said that, I understand a new chairman's need for setting an aggressive agenda, and I respect Chairman Waxman for his willingness to have a proactive committee. Hopefully we can be as proactive with less money and be more effective in doing that. With that, I would yield back.
Thank you very much. And the chair is going to recognize himself for the first question. That is, Mr. Waxman, obviously the legislative branch and the House of Representatives has its agenda, but last night we did listen to the president, and if I recall, he highlighted basically 3 areas that he will be concentrating on, and I think you pointed that out: health, energy, and education. Health and energy will be primarily in the jurisdiction of your committee. Is that correct?
That's right.
So even if Congress didn't have that focus, even if Congress wasn't going to expend all its attention on 2 out of those 3, it's coming, and it's coming from the White House, and it will end up in your committee.
That's correct, and he also mentioned he wants us to deal with the carbon emissions problem, global warming, climate change. So we're working on all 3 of those issues. They're very high priorities for this administration, and we're working on them at the same time. So we need the ability to do our job.
You also indicated that some of the additional costs in the new budget could be attributed to transition costs. If you can try to explain that a little bit to the members of the committee. And further, is there a component for deferred equipment purchases?
We had the transition cost because I'm a new chairman, and having come from the House Oversight Committee. Some of our staff will be moving over. They have stayed on the payroll of the House Oversight Committee. Some of the people on the Energy and Commerce Committee we're going to keep, but those who are going to leave, we didn't want to drop them from the payroll on January 1. We didn't think that was a fair thing to do. So we do have those transition costs. I think that the equipment issue is one that we need to work on, and we're trying to hold down the cost, but we have to be able to have the ability to do the telecommuting and all the technical things that make committee viable and efficient.
Thank you. Mr. Barton?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
And now, if you have any remarks based on the questions that I posed to Chairman Waxman. On the agenda being driven pretty much by the White House, and it'll be visiting us whether we would welcome it or not, and most of it falls within the jurisdiction of the committee, and further transition costs and what might be deferred equipment purchases.
Well, I would acknowledge that on the majority side there are transition costs, and I certainly commend Chairman Waxman for trying to alleviate some of the suffering of the staff relocation. I think that's a positive thing. My comment on the agenda, though, is I'm going to quote something that Ginger Rogers said when somebody asked her to comment on Fred Astaire as a dance partner and how accomplished he was. Her retort was, "I do everything he does except backwards in high heels." Well, the minority does everything the majority does, except we do it with a third of the staff, and most days less notice because of the way the system works. So whatever the agenda is, we'll do our best to respond to Mr. Waxman and President Obama, but we'll do it backwards in high heels and try to be just as good.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Mr. Waxman.
I want to add to your question about the equipment budget. We're asking for no increase in the equipment budget for 2009.
Right.
We will for 2010 because we'll need update on the equipment by then, but we're not asking for an increase for this year.
Thank you very much. And the chair is going to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lundgren.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we're dealing with a 2-year request here for the next Congress. And one of the reasons I bring that up is that we've asked the other chairman and ranking members whether they would actively work with us in coming back after the first year so we can review where we are after a year. These are significant increase in requests that have been made and probably will ultimately result. And in the matter of just fiscal prudence, it just seems to be a good idea for us to have committees come back to us. We look at what happened with the requests that were made and where we are going into the next year. Could we have that commitment of cooperation from both of you?
Well, certainly we want to cooperate with the committee and do whatever you think is necessary to make sure that we both do our jobs.
Sure.
I notice in all the requests that we have, the largest single budgets of all the committees in the Congress are First Energy and Commerce. The combined request for the 111th Congress would be just shy of $25 million, and the second largest is Oversight and Government Reform at just shy of $24 million. And the math that we have, Mr. Barton, shows that the 2-year request over the previous 2-year request amounts to about an 18.7% increase. That's one of the largest increases of anybody that's come before us. And I guess the question is, Mr. Waxman, could you do more? Could you do what you have to do with less?
I think we would be unable to do the things that we need to do with all these major issues simultaneously being considered by our committee. So I think our work product would be adversely affected. These are the kinds of issues that we need to do right, not just do a job on and get a bill out. We've got to try to get hopefully a bipartisan consensus, make sure the policy makes sense, and we need to have the experts who can help us accomplish those goals.
If I could forecast that there would be a bipartisan consensus, I would give you this money and more. I would hope we might be able to get a bipartisan consensus on this. All right, it's just tough for us in this environment. I mean, I believe that the Congress of the United States has an obligation to be the oversight people over the executive branch.
Yes.
And I have been one of those who's criticized both Democrat and Republican Congresses for not doing the job. So I would be derelict in my duty if I suggested that you ought not to do oversight. It's just the question I've got to ask is whether an 18.7% increase in the current economic environment, where while the president did outline all those things he said last night, I do recall him telling us that we're not supposed to put the debt on our children or grandchildren. I'm old enough, as you know, Mr. Waxman, to have grandchildren now, and it's become a reality to me. I loved what the president had to say. I just hope that his rhetoric matches up to his actions, and I hope our actions match up to that rhetoric. And we're going to have to answer our constituents about the budgets that we have, and 18.7% is quite a bit more than inflation or anything like that. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. The chair will recognize the chairman, Mr. Brady. Any questions? Mr. Harper.
Thank you. Mr. Waxman, how are you? It's an honor to get to see both of you here, and I have a couple of questions. Listening to the president's speech last night, if he said it, I apologize, I missed it, but was there anything about nuclear energy I don't remember discussed in the speech last night? Is that something that you're pursuing favorably as a committee or discounting?
As we look at our energy needs, especially the goal of becoming more independent from importing our energy from places that do not wish us well, I think we have to look at a whole portfolio of sources, and I cannot imagine that we're going to meet our energy needs in this country without nuclear energy.
Okay.
So I see that as part of the overall sources to deal with our growing needs in this country, and especially as we want to be more independent.
And one of the other things that the president discussed, Mr. Chairman, was that we are importing a record level of oil from foreign countries, and also that we're paying a price for our dependence upon oil. If those are concerns, are we moving as a committee, or do you anticipate moving as a committee towards additional exploration to recover our own natural resources, whether it be in ANWR, it be additional drilling for natural gas offshore? Are those things we are just abandoning, or are we going to pursue getting those so that is a method as we pursue these other ideas to decrease that dependence upon foreign oil?
The question of drilling in ANWR or offshore is not really within our committee's jurisdiction. It's not Natural Resources Committee. But what we need to do, in my view, is to provide the incentives to look for alternative energy sources, to use our energy resources that we have more efficiently, and to try to put in place the incentives for the private sector to develop that new technology, some of which we have and some of which we're close to getting, so that we can become more energy independent. It's a national security issue. We need to provide more jobs that will be, I think, promoted. And then we need to deal with the carbon emissions that are causing the threats of global warming, which may be the biggest environmental challenge that any of us have ever imagined.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I know, though, that in my district, in my state, I don't think that the small businesses and the students and people that are of modest means or seniors can endure another $4 a gallon gas price problem. So it may take years as we develop alternative means of energy and sources, and if we don't explore those further to get the fossil fuel that's available as a bridge even, then we're really hurting our small businesses. And so I would hope that would be something that we would look at. And one last comment I'd have, Mr. Chairman, is that I know that, as the President stated, as your committee stated, as you look at global warming issues, and we try to look at less spending or not growing at this rate, is it possible to shift any of the global warming work that your committee might be required to do to the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming? I know they don't do legislative work, I understand, but is there not stuff that could be shifted to them that you can draw from that reduces the need for additional employees?
Well, we want to learn from their series of hearings and any reports that they produce as a result of it. We're going to be talking closely to them. But we, as a legislative committee, have to be the ones on top of the issue. We're going to learn from the private sector, the public sector, anyone who has views. We want to take them into consideration, but we ultimately have to decide the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would the gentleman yield? On your time, would you mind if I asked Mr. Barton a question? Mr. Barton, you suggested 3 scenarios that you could support. Could you give us some guidance as to where you think we ought to end up in terms of an increase above just simple inflation?
Well, I understand Chairman Waxman's desire to beef up the staff, and that's understandable as a new chairman. But my guess is we'll get just as much work done whether we have any increase at all, knowing how aggressive and effective Mr. Waxman is. So, if he wants a few more staff members, I respect that. As we've already established that if he gets 2, I get 1. And so my job will be to make sure my 1 can do what his 2 do. I don't know what the other committees are asking, but I would think that this committee is probably going to end up at inflation plus a couple of %, something like that, and I could support that. But I could also support a budget freeze would not be the end of the world for this committee or for the Congress. That would send the right signal to the American people that as they tighten their belt, the Congress is going to tighten its belt also.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harper and Mr. Lundgren. We've been joined by committee member Ms. Lofgren. And if you have any questions, no questions. Mr. Waxman, Mr. Barton, thank you very much.
Could I just comment on something that was not asked me, but was asked Mr. Waxman about this climate change committee? I would hope y'all would abolish it. Whatever needs to be done between Mr. Waxman's troops and my scallywag band of troops, we can get it done. We don't need the select committee. To quote former Chairman Dingell, it's as useless as feathers on a fish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton. Mr. Waxman.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rangel, Ranking Member Camp. Thank you for coming in front of our House Administration today, and we'll look forward to your comments and your statement. I'd like to recognize Chairman Rangel.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for your patience with us. We come here, Mr. Camp and I, with some degree of unanimity. We always have had no problem in the split of the allocation, 1/3, 2/3. We ask 2/3. We're proposing a 5% increase from 2008, and for 2010, we propose a 5% increase from 2009. Total is increase of approximately 9.2 over the 110th Congress. We had suffered a tremendous cut in the 104th Congress, funding cut of about 37%, and the largest number of personnel in recent history, 51% for a committee that still function. Considering all of this, we intend to add 3 additional staff in view of the President's mandate of Social Security, tax reform, climate change, family security, and especially health, which is coming up. We've accounted for travel, staff increases, and we hope that you would favorably consider the request of our distinguished committee. And thank you again for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Camp.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Lundgren and other members of the committee. I appreciate having the opportunity to appear before you and with Chairman Rangel in support of our budget proposal for the 111th Congress. And I just wanted to mention 2 weeks ago, as we neared conclusion on the work on the President's stimulus bill, Chairman Rangel and I were forced to postpone our testimony because of the scheduling meeting of the conference, and I want to offer my thanks and appreciation to the committee for rescheduling our appearance here. I also want to express my appreciation to Chairman Rangel for working with me and my staff as he developed the Ways and Means budget request. We were consulted in the preparation of the budget proposal, and as he mentioned, under this budget proposal, the minority has full control of 1/3 of the budget and resources, and we will need these resources. I think the chairman will readily agree that as difficult a challenge as the stimulus bill was, the Ways and Means Committee will play an even more active role in many other high-profile issues in the 111th Congress. A few of the major bills include tax reform, health reform, climate change. And so accordingly, I support the committee's budget proposal. An increase in our current budget will provide the additional resources we need to meet the challenges of the 111th Congress. It's consistent with the requested increases in the past several Congresses, and I should note that the budget request was approved by our committee unanimously on February 11th. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, and I don't know why our bells aren't going off in this room or our lights, but I understand there's a vote on now, and we have 12 minutes left. So rather than bring you back, I would ask our committee to be rather short in any questions they ask, and we can not miss a vote. So with that, Ranking Member Mr. Lundgren.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I don't consider that a gag or anything.
Yes, I understand that.
Reality. Yeah.
I see the 111th congressional request from your committee is for $20,789,331.46. You're the only ones that got actually to the penny, so I presume that all of it's divided 1/3, 2/3 in terms of staff and other expenditures. Let me ask you this, same thing we've asked other committees. For a number of years, committees came before this committee for 1-year authorization. Now we do it by Congress, but we thought it might be good to have committees return to us after 1 year for us to review what's happened, the expenditures we've had, see how that actually has set up with respect to the intentions you had when you started. I would hope that both of you would agree to do that with us.
We agree if you decide that's the way you want to proceed. It doesn't make sense to be able to try to plan for 1 year. It seems that 2 years is short enough, but...
No, but this is just to come back after a year for us to take a look and make sure how things were going after we do the 2-year authorization.
Oh, sure. You can come back every 6 months, whatever you think is good.
No. We don't want to see you that much, Charlie. I appreciate that.
No, we're so proud of our staff. We're proud of the way we work together, and you may be able to make some observations or recommendations that we could improve what we're doing.
Absolutely. Would be happy to cooperate in any way that the committee deems.
I have a whole list of questions, but in respect to the chairman's request, I will refrain from asking them at this point in time.
I'll meet you on the floor.
Ms. Lofgren?
Given that votes have been called, the request is unanimous and bipartisan, and the task before you is enormous, I will pass on additional questions.
Mr. Harper?
No questions.
We thank you very much and appreciate you appearing in front of us and look forward to seeing you again and working along with you, and thank you for the job that you do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for your patience with us.
We will recess now. We will come back with one more committee, which is rules. Rules. The last committee to come back. Thank you.